Resilience isn't about shouting loudly. The resilience isn't about being overt about it. Resilience is knowing and believing that you can get through something by not allowing that feeling of being a victim to take hold, because it's very easy to be dragged down into the mire of victimhood. And especially when you feel assaulted by perfection everywhere.
Hello, my name's Naranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast. Learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Of talking to Hannah Ingram-Moore, a business leader, author, and daughter of Captain Sir Tom Moore, who blends global brand expertise with a passion for resilience and purpose. She now helps others navigate adversity with clarity and connection, inspiring hope through speaking, writing, and philanthropy. Enjoy this conversation and thank you for watching and listening. Hello and welcome to Hannah. How are you, Hannah?
I'm very well, thanks, Naranjan. And how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad that we get to have this conversation and you get to share your journey and your experiences, not only in the world of business and finance and philanthropy, but also in the space of family, of your journey with your family and your father specifically, and all that entails, because it sounds like you've had quite the whirlwind, as I want to say you designed, but a lot of us design our lives, and I'm a firm believer of we choose these experiences. So I'm going to go in with a really big question of what is it you believe about yourself, and does it define who you are, knowing all that you've been through, the hardships, but also some of the really cherishable, great experiences that you've been able to garner in this thing called life?
Yeah, well, it's a great opening question. And I think that age does become us. My mother used to say I was an old soul, that I knew things that I shouldn't have done for my age, or at least I appeared to. I'm not sure that's particularly true, but I think I always felt very grounded in life. I never felt ill at ease with life. In fact, I loved it. I loved school. Didn't mean I was the most brilliant scholar, but I loved school. I loved everything I did. So if I think now about the person that I am, I think that I'm sure now of my own abilities, and that some of the things that have happened in my life, it feels like I forecast them. I forecasted them, and that seems bizarre, right? How can that be? That's such a ridiculous thing to say, that you forecast, but maybe now as an older person, it's not, because I had a belief that certain things would happen in my life, and I suppose because of that innate belief, I enabled them to happen. And the thing that we now talk much more about is manifesting. And I didn't know what the word was, probably until the last few years. And certainly probably thought, how ridiculous. Of course you can't manifest yourself to be this or this. But actually, I much more believe now that we have energy, we have power in our own ability. And if you channel belief, positivity, and the desire to do the right thing, it is quite incredible what can happen. Just a few months before, where I'll come to a little bit later, before we raised £40 million during COVID, I said to my team, my business consulting team, do you know, something is going to happen. And they said, oh, you're all witchy. And I said, no, something, I can feel it. Something's going to happen and it's going to be global. And they said, well, we hope so. We hope that you're going to get a global contract. Of course, we didn't know what it was, but they will all tell you now that then when suddenly this thing happened, they went, oh, she talked about it. Now, I don't know, you know more than me because you are a much more esteemed in the world of energy and auras than I am. But there is no question that there are things that have happened in my life that I believed and I knew they were coming. And there are other things that I didn't foresee at all. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Mhm. Has that defined who Hannah is today? In retrospect and in reflection of what you've just shared, these pieces of knowings, and in hindsight, we can look at life, but what does that make you believe about yourself?
Yeah, and I think that has definitely changed. I believe now more emphatically that I have a purpose that is beyond the everyday. That's so much of what I have gone through, and not only survived some of the hardships, but have come out the other side,
Right.
believing that I needed to go through them to make me the person that I am. I believe that I'm, I still am a very grounded person.
Mm.
Now I think what I'm able to do is look people in the eye and say, I have been through that. And I do know how we can deal with it. And I know that you'll survive it and come out the other side. And I can be with you on that journey hand in hand. So I think the me I am today is a product of all of those things, but in a very positive way. I
Mhm.
feel joy. Actually, I feel joy.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful not only to witness it, but to be aware of it in your sphere, to be able to bring it in even further into our lives, right?
Yeah, definitely. It feels like a real gift.
Mm-hmm.
To be, I sometimes have to squash down because almost there's not enough space for it. I
Right.
sometimes have to think, oh, I just have to pack that away for a little while because the world's not quite ready for what I feel, which is an amazing thing to feel, right? I feel
Mm.
like that there's so much there at my fingertips. And it is an extraordinary way to feel in your life that I think comes with age.
Yeah. It comes with age, but I think the element of acceptance also does too.
Yeah, yeah.
Self-acceptance that this is what we're here to do. These are the gifts and the experiences that we get to embody a little bit more and be less concerned as to what others say, do, feel, all of that. So I kind of want to question you on, you squash yourself, as you said. I
Mm,
don't know if that's a good idea. However, that can go off in another tangent piece
yeah,
of the conversation. Or maybe it'll roll in a little bit
yeah,
later. But
maybe.
my curiosity is, having gone through a world of business and developing business and being in different sectors and now in that whole coaching space, so to speak, with the loss of your father and all of that grief that contained, how did you determine that this is your calling at this juncture of your life?
I think it goes back a little bit further. It was more around the loss of my mother, in fact, although I lost my father on a global stage. So, of course, so many more people engage with me about that because everyone saw it. The deeper impact of loss came with my mother, I think. And it's not that I'm comparing the losses, but my father was old and he'd
Mm.
lived an amazing life. And as
Mm.
much as we felt the deep grief because he'd lived with us for 14 years, I can't express the depth of that grief. It was like losing not a father, but almost like a child in many ways
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
he'd become so embedded in our family
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
But the loss of my mother had a powerful, powerful impact on me as a person,
Mm.
because her loss, it was a living grief that happened over a long period of time, more than 10 years. So through my 20s and into my early 30s, I was quietly grieving the loss of my mother while she was still alive. But every day that I saw her, she knew less of me. And that, as I was, it was in tandem with my career really taking off. So here I was, traveling around the world, with everyone seeing me as that individual who would arrive and be very purposeful and driven and attentive and successful. Little did any of them know that I had my mother, the deep ingrained loss of my mother was going on behind the scenes. And I never shared it. I never shared it because I didn't want them to label me. Because I knew as soon as I said, my mother's dying, that it would deflect from my purpose. So what I did, which is not a healthy thing to do, but was right for me at the time, is I squashed it to a degree, because there was part of my life it couldn't live in. And then when I did go home and then I was with my father, and visiting my mother, neither could I really talk about it then, because his grief felt more important than mine. It was the love of his life that he was losing. So my grief had to go somewhere else. And I had a home life with a husband and a child. And so those were such significant challenges. But her death came, as many people who listen to this, if they've gone through dementia, Alzheimer's, a degenerative brain disease, will know the pain of it. It seems almost a relief when it actually concludes, when she finally died. Yeah. But then, of course, you move from living grief into absolute grief. Yeah. But there I am in a world of international business. And there's an allocated time off that you get for compassionate leave. And when you come back, is everything okay? Yeah. And people don't know culturally how to deal with that, at least certainly not in the cultures that I live in, as varied as they are. So you're back from compassionate leave, so you're fine then. And so now I'm going through the grief and loss whilst having a small child and a home life, and the businesses around me, because I was consulting already, would send me flowers and things, and look, lovely, but no time to stop and grieve at all. So when I think of the impact of loss, that loss had a greater negative impact on me than the loss that came later, because the loss of my father was so public. When it was his funeral, a helicopter followed us overhead. The funeral was beamed out around the world. We're told that millions of people watched it, and there was something so utterly surreal as looking out to the motorway and people lining the side of the motorway. And we're not allowed to stand on the side of motorway. People were standing alongside of what's a busy A road, throwing flowers onto the road. It was still lockdown, so nobody could come. They'd been mandated not to stand close to each other, not to come out, but people felt compelled. Right. And so that loss, so deeply profound, because it was losing someone who'd been at the heart of our family for almost 14 years, that it was a shake to the core, because now I looked at my children who knew nothing else than living with my father and saw their grief. And then, more than that, other people's grief at the loss of my father. So now here's another twist to my grief. I had to shut it away, because when people would stop me in the street and say, oh, the loss, your father has affected me so much, and I loved him, and I also lost someone else in my family, I realized I was almost like a walking grief counselor, because I was soaking up everyone else's grief, and I knew that in order to get through that, I had to find a strong place, that I had to pull on my reserves, because I had to be the person who could take in their grief. And that's not because I was saying, oh, poor me. I was saying, because I can, because I can, because I can take it, because I know I'm strong enough. And so those losses have had a profound effect on who I am, because many people my age still have both their parents, and I have neither.
Yeah. Grief, I think, can be overlooked so dismissively
Yeah,
in not only the loss of a loved one, but we can grieve relationships, experiences,
yes,
people, places, and things.
yeah,
And I think it has such an interesting root in how it changes us as human beings. But yet, everybody goes through it, whether you know your parents or whether you're close to somebody that who chooses to transition at that time, and you get to witness that. Grief is an innate thing that happens, but as human beings, we get to go through that process, to live that experience, which I believe is a real gift, even though as painful as it is. It's a gift that we get to navigate some of those emotions and
yeah,
work through for ourselves, because ultimately, at the end of the day, what we know for sure, Hannah, is all of these experiences that we have in life, they're for the betterment of us. They're our
yeah,
experience, they're for us, and they are for us to witness and go through, because we designed it as a soul to come through and have this experience. So I hear you loud and clear in wanting to support other people. And I think as humans, it's a natural element that we want to do that. We see other people in their own loss and we see people in their own grief. So there's an element of, how can I support you? Just as they kind of feel that maybe they're doing that for you as they share their loving memories and experiences of your father.
yeah.
What made you want to continue that and be in that space of grief? Because yes, your father's an icon and he has had such big influence in Britain in that space. However, you could have very easily said, okay, and that's happened, and I'm going to focus on my business that's thriving, the coaching and that space, and allow those grieving moments, the loss of your mother, your father, and the life cycle of that's a quiet space for Hannah and her family inside her heart. Why did you choose to continue this on a public space?
I don't know that I actually chose to. It felt like a natural follow on. And there's no question that through my life and through my business, much of my success has come through my ability to coach and to lead. If I look back at my successes across and very commercial successes, the reality is that those successes were embedded by my ability to lead and coach people to success. And interestingly, I had a meeting with one of the CEO of one of the businesses I was consulting into not that long ago. And it's a venture capitalist that owned this business. And I had set up the international division for it. And we had double-digited growth, but most importantly, profit. And when I sat with them, they said, we see the numbers, but we're not quite sure how you did it. So can you explain to us how you did it? And so I really thought, really, they don't understand. So I took it to its most basic form. And I said, look, you gave me a dysfunctional team. What I did was make sure each of those team players that I knew what made each of them tick. What was their purpose? What was their ambition? I made sure I took all of those things and we wound it into the same belief and purpose. and we were all achieving the same thing whilst being individually nourished. And you know, he turned around and said to me, "Oh, well, that's typical you, isn't it? You're always all about the people." And that shows you how dysfunctionally opposite so many businesses are, because they forget that their real genuine resource is all the people within it. So when you look at my life now, it's not a conscious decision to keep taking the grief with me. It's more that I realized in those conversations that I could offer something very powerful and positive and support other people through their journey. But most of my coaching isn't around grief. Most of my coaching is around self-development. It's around finding purpose and being successful. Many people are stuck in their lives, and I found a really unique place where I'm very good at unblocking people so that they can go forward and be successful. I have written a book on grief, which was my outlet. It was my ability to put it on paper, but I didn't want it to be all about me. It's called Grief, Public Face, Private Loss, because I realized that my father's loss was very public, but there was also a deep privacy to it too, and the loss of my mother. But I wrote it as a book that was mostly self-help, because we're very, very poor at managing and dealing with other people's grief. And it was an attempt to support other people's grief. But that is not my life's work, I don't think. Where my life is turning is that I'm in the speaking circuit, for inspirational speaking, to show people we can get through life, through difficult challenges, using our resilience. And I listen to you talking and other people in your sphere, and I'm much more acutely centered towards this than I've ever been before. That so much of what we are is what we were intended to be. This is not an accident. That it was defined, and we are part of that path.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you're able to share your findings and your own growth and expansion in a journey where it does support others, because ultimately we get to make some of those big decisions, right? How we can support others, and if we choose to, because there are many people probably out in the world who are just more than happy being in their own sphere of life and doing their day-to-day, and that's okay too. There's really no element of judgment. It doesn't have to be that everybody has to be out in the public eye and serving and supporting in that way. So it's an interesting space to be in, and I'm glad that you've taken that turn to support others and rechannel, if you will, your own purpose, but also to support others on their journey. What do you feel are some of the attributes that align you to do what you do in supporting others, but also supporting yourself and your family?
Yeah, because there's a huge piece behind this, especially when you're thrust into the public eye, that people often forget because of social media and the way we consume our media, that I'm a real person, and that behind the real person are real genuine emotions, and that of my family and my children too. So I've been very cognizant of protecting my family in all through this process, because my children they're not children anymore, but they'll always be my children, but they are growing and they are pursuing their own lives, and I want them to do that with grace and dignity and confidence and assurity, and they're my priorities. Honestly, if I was ever having to choose, then it's them all the way. But so far I've been able to blend that, because they look on and are inspired by what has happened in our life. And where I feel that my skills are, I have taken all of the things that have happened, and I feel very balanced as an individual, and I believe I can offer balance and security and peace, because I feel it. I also think that to be able to showcase resilience, because we talk about resilience a lot in today's world. But what does that mean? Resilience isn't about shouting loudly. The resilience isn't about being overt about it. Resilience is knowing and believing that you can get through something by not allowing that feeling of being a victim to take hold, because it's very easy to be dragged down into the mire of victimhood. And especially when you feel assaulted by perfection everywhere, that my skills are in helping people to see their purpose, because I feel such innate purpose. I feel like it runs through me, like a steel rod. And I think that's my power. I'm able to give that assurity to other people, and there are many people who need it.
Granted, life will present us with experiences that will test us.
Yeah.
For that assurity, for that confidence, for that sense of knowing, for that sense of purpose. When did you recognize that rod, if you will, as you've put it, that sense of this is what I'm here to do, even though it's probably changed over the years? When did that collide in your consciousness first?
Really recently. I think that as we're growing through those early years of careers and whatever we choose to be, we can often mistake our identity for our jobs. It happens a lot. And probably my job was all consuming, and I loved it. I loved it. And so I was, I think, for a long time, what I did. That's who I was. It's because that's who I am. I am this ex-person who does these things. And I think, yeah, classic. And then, of course, I become a mother. And now I have a dichotomy, because I am and I am. So now who am I? Because am I as good at this if I'm doing this? And am I as good at this if I'm doing this? So how does that work? How do I be brilliant here and a brilliant mother at the same time? And over the years, I've had many things said to me. Well, you've been earning your 6-figure salary, but I was there for my children at least. And I swallowed those things, because I realized that those comments were much more about the person saying them than they were about me. Because I've said to some people, as they said those things over the years, I understand where you're coming from, but please measure my relationship with my children before you judge me, because I have an incredible relationship with my children that I'm really proud of. And that is part of who I am. I've had an outstanding career and business successes, and that is part of who I am. But I don't know that if you'd asked me then, was I sure of what my purpose was, I'd have probably said yes, because I'm busy over here doing these things. I don't know that I would have been able to be I wouldn't honestly been able to say, because I would have been too caught up saying I'm doing all of these. Now, today, having gone through so much adversity, but so much experience that I never expected to have, being thrust onto a global stage, being recognized wherever I go, that having come through 2 huge parcels and elements and times of grief in my life, and I'm here today, having gone through all of those things, and now I'm very clear of my purpose. And all of those years of getting there has delivered me to who I am today. And I feel very secure in it.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful that you've got that sense of security by being in that space. I do recognize that as human beings, we go through life and we go through experiences at that juncture of your time, the identifying label being mother or business owner, or where your surest think that this is who I am. It probably came with a sense of certainty right? So as we evolve, we grow, and we're able to sift through different things. And the reality is life changes. Your children are not at your knees or at your hip. So they're grown adults, and that changes the dynamic of your relationship with them, but also the relationship with yourself. So therefore it leaves and creates more space. But that, I believe, is just a more elevation of life, of how we live through it and what we go through. So I think that's an interesting observation of there is an element of certainty regardless of what phase of life that we are in.
Yeah. And you have an incredible way that I deeply respect of looking at this, that I think many people might not yet have the consciousness of, but I think people are growing, developing, and are very keen to understand a greater sense of who they are. And there is no question that one of the things that used to scare me was I'd see women in particular, not always women, men too, but mostly women, who would say, my children have left home and I don't know who I am anymore. And I never wanted that to be me. I never did think it would be, but you never quite know where how you're going to feel. And I feel so far removed from that, that I feel like my children are still my children, but they're growing into they're becoming their own people, and they will never stop being my dependents. But it doesn't leave me bereft. It leaves me being able to fill that a little bit of space in and say, oh, this is part of who I am. And I'm really, really happy with it. And I'm happy with it because I've grown to not be centered around what other people think. And I think, especially today, we can be consumed, especially how many likes do you have? How many impressions do you have? What do people think of you? What do they say about you? And I've removed that. I don't believe it's healthy to be measured by those things. For me, what's healthy is to be measured by those people immediately that I impact and who's around me. And that's my measure. That's my measure of who I am. And I feel in a really good space about it. But I truly admire your sense of looking at how we grow as individuals and as humans, and how much we don't know about ourselves.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah, for that. Absolutely. The more we delve into this space and create that space, as you've shared, the more I begin to realize how much we don't know. Yeah. It's that classic adage, right? The more we know, the more we really don't know. So I'm in that space, and I appreciate all you've said. How do you get to the space of staying consistent in not only what your message is to share with the world based on your experiences, but also staying true to yourself? Because I'm sure, I don't know for certain, but I'm sure there are opportunities that get presented your way that look like, as I'm going to call it, shiny objects. Oh, that's a shiny object over there. That would be really interesting to navigate into. Well, there's another one over there too. Let's go and navigate that. So how do you get to stay on track with, no, this is my wheelhouse, this is my purpose, or this is where I feel I need to be at this moment? How do you determine that for you?
It's a really good question. Because yes, it's true, there are many things that come across my path, but more than any other time in my life, I feel very centered. And so I think when you feel like the space that you exist in is not deficient in anything, I feel I have a very contented and happy life, and it's not an accident. That's for sure, because I want it to be, and I believe it should be, and I believe that it can be. And therefore, I'm not seeking something to make up for something else. And I think that's very straightforward for me. I don't need another thing to complete my circle. I feel absolutely resolute in my path, my purpose, my abilities, and my skills. And mostly I feel like that because I've allowed myself to not feel the judgment of others. In a way, someone once said to me when I was rising through the ranks of my job, never believe the PR about you, never believe your own PR. And in the same way, neither do I need the excesses of you're amazing or the you need to do this, because I have nothing deficient that requires either of those things. And I think if you look at what you have and you look and think how lucky I am, how it would be wrong for me to feel that I need anything else, because I'm perfectly contented with where I am.
Beautiful. It's beautiful to be in that position and to be in that stage of your life to be.
Yeah, it's taken a long time, right? It's taken a long time.
It's always a road and it's always a journey, which is why we get to treasure it so much, because if it was right at the tip of our fingertips, we probably wouldn't treasure it as much.
No, you're absolutely right.
You would just write it off as,
Yeah.
There's another shiny object over there, so let's go and look at that instead.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very different perspective. So what's next for Hannah?
Gosh, in my immediate life, I am about to launch my own podcast. And inspired by many of the podcasts I've been on, it's really interesting because I've done many over the years for different things, and even in the early dawn of podcasts. And genuinely, I have learned so much from engaging with very different hosts than I would have been used to in my corporate life. And I used to think there's not a space for everybody, but I think there is a space for everybody. And having come from a recent world where I know that things can be said about you that simply aren't true, and one has no control over that in today's world of social media, that I am creating a podcast that is simply a space for people to tell their remarkable stories in their own way. And that is anything from the kitchen table to the red carpet to the boardroom, because so much of what is pushed out at us is judged, it's predetermined, it's twisted in a way. And I simply wanted to create a platform very similar to yours that allows people to speak freely in their own way. So that's coming soon, and I'm very excited about that. I have written one book, and my first book, as I say, was about grief that allowed me to share, but also put it there. I've put it there, and it feels like that's allowed me to move on. My next book is very much inspired by some of my clients who have said to me over the years, I just wake up in a muddle and I never can unmuddle myself throughout the day. And I think lots of people do feel like that. And so my new book coming out is called Transform Your Morning. And it's just 10-minute rituals, 10 minutes of rituals to set your day off. So I'm loving the space I'm in, which is writing, speaking, podcasting, and coaching. And I think that's probably more than enough for now.
It sounds like a full offer, that's for sure. Definitely a full table there for me, for sure. And I'm sure it's going to be great. Keep me posted on all of those pieces. I'm happy to share and support as best as I can.
Thank you.
Hannah, it's been such an interesting conversation. In hearing your perspective, not only about grief, but also being in a space of self-reflection as you embark through single life, but also in the space of how to bring it all together to create more meaning and to have a deeper purpose.
Yeah.
To share beyond your own family.
I thank you for giving me the space. And when we first connected, I knew innately that the ability you have is to allow people to feel their way through and maybe learn more about themselves through the conversations with you. Because I think there's no question that we have to let it in. We have to be open, and we have to reward ourselves and say, it's okay not to be okay all the time. But that doesn't mean that we're derailed. And when you start thinking about our energies and our auras and our purpose and the fact that so much of what is in our life is already written by ourselves. Once you start looking through that lens, you can't help but look more expansively at everything. And for me, I think, how can I possibly not feel happy, contented, and joyful? How could I not feel like that? And I just want to inspire other people to feel like that too, because it's a good feeling.
It's a beautiful feeling, but it's one that we get to choose to make. Because
Yes.
not everybody is in that space of, yes, we get to choose life, but also I get to choose life on a higher elevation.
Yeah.
Because there's a messiness with life. There's always a messiness.
Yeah, totally
of
messy.
life. There's traffic, there's groceries, there's debt, there's bills, there's all kinds of messiness of it.
Yeah.
But it's up to us, we get to control how we interact with it. And I think that's what often gets lost
Yes.
in the mix of life and the narrative out there of how life should be lived and all of those pieces. So I commend you on taking in the joyful pieces of life as you navigate through further the next juncture of business and sharing what you know with the rest of the world. So I conclude with saying thank you, Hannah, for sharing your story, your time, and your energy with me. I'm appreciative and I'm trusting people who watch and hear this will garner something beautiful out of this conversation too.
Well, thank you again. And I wish all of your listeners the very best. With love from me to all of them.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.